Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
So, our first order of business, we're going to have Cynthia give us a quick presentation on AT systems. Um, yeah, I kind of felt like it was necessary to do this because I know some of the other groups are having some conversations about AT, and and I don't really have a good knowledge of how the systems work, how they're, just the general background of the system. And I thought it'd be a good idea to do that before we get into talking about the process, policy, and funding for how we can support this when that topic comes up. So, without further ado, Cynthia, can you share your screen, and do you have that ability?
Absolutely. Can you guys see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so my name is Cynthia Morton-Rolliston. I'm the operations manager for Fuji Clean USA. I've been in this industry for the last 7 years. I'm in Maine, that's where our headquarters is, so I'm your kind of neighbor up here. I'm here today mostly because I'm excited to hear that you guys are looking seriously at your on-site reform and policies. And I'm really passionate about protecting waterways, especially in New England. So today we're going to talk about what advanced treatment is. Then I'll go into the installation and maintenance of advanced treatment units. And then I'm going to just do a quick comparison of local regulations, just so you guys can take some notes for your future conversations. So what is advanced treatment? So in Connecticut that 40% of your population relies on on-site wastewater treatment. In Connecticut, that means a septic tank. So septic tanks rely on anaerobic bacteria to break down the contaminants in the wastewater. And then this clarified wastewater with this kind of effluent quality goes into the soil, and the soil is responsible for doing the rest of the treatment. Soil, however, cannot treat nitrogen well, and so a lot of that nitrogen just leaches into the groundwater. Advanced treatment units kind of take that same biological process that's happening in the septic tank and the soils, and enhances it and controls it, sometimes in a smaller footprint. And since the effluent is significantly better, you don't have to rely on the soil to do the lion's share of the treatment work. Advanced treatment units are used all over the world. Our technology has been used in Japan for the last 60 years. But in the United States, advanced treatment is everywhere. There is 50,000 or more advanced treatment units going into Texas every year where they have really poor soil quality. There's a lot of advanced treatment in Ohio, New York, Maine, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. It's really everywhere. Yeah. Oh, and since we're not relying on the soil to do most of the work, a lot of jurisdictions allow a drain field credit or something, so that you can kind of put these advanced treatment units in a smaller overall treatment package. So I'm going to give you an overview of just the FujiClean system because that's what I'm familiar with. Obviously, not all advanced treatment units work the same way, but I wanted to kind of give you a basic overview of our system. And so this is where the influent comes in from the house. This sedimentation chamber is where it's kind of the industry trash tank or septic tank portion of the treatment. This is where we'll get sludge accumulation, scum will float to the top, the greases and fats and oils. Then these are kind of in the middle. They look a little high in this picture, but the clarified wastewater comes up through this anaerobic media. We have specific anaerobic bacteria growth that happens naturally, that decomposes the nitrogen oxides into nitrogen gas. And then the wastewater flows into this final chamber. That's where it meets the air, which is really kind of the powerhouse of this treatment. There's nothing inside of here that's moving or has to be replaced or anything. The air is really doing all of the work. So that air is feeding this aerobic bacteria, these tiny bubbles. It's also powering a recirculation airlift pump that is recirculating this wastewater multiple times before being dispersed to the drain field. And it's also powering that effluent airlift pump. In Maine, the drain fields are all leach fields, just standard leaching. So it's all gravity fed. All right. So moving on to installation and maintenance. I kind of estimated a 4-bedroom house for you guys. Obviously, different technologies cost different amounts of money. Installation can vary wildly depending on the sites. And, you know, your locale, I'm guessing in Long Island, they're paying contractors probably astronomical prices. And so, you know, I just want you to take all of this information with a grain of salt. So the system itself is about $7,000. The installation, $10,000 and up. Maintenance, the first 2 years are required by NSF to be included in the price of the tank. So there's no cost to the homeowner for the first 2 years. And then we're seeing an average nationwide for our company of about $300 per year thereafter. These systems are relatively low power draw, costing approximately $100 per year. I didn't have to do
$300. What does that $300 entail? What does it cover?
Yep, 2 maintenance visits per year for a FujiClean system. And then I have a couple of other technologies listed in a couple of slides so you can kind of see how many maintenance visits are included. Obviously, if there's like an emergency call, that's generally an extra charge. And it could be more depending on what kind of dispersal system you have. Some dispersal systems require more maintenance. So in Maryland, they have pretty strict nitrogen requirements, and they give a lot of transparency to their constituents about the costs of these advanced treatment units. So I basically stole the next several slides from them. So if you would like to review what they have, you're more than welcome to. This is just free and readily available from the Maryland DEP. So this is that cost of purchase, installation, and 2-year O&M that's required by NSF for a number of different technologies. And this is based on Maryland alone. Then this is the electrical consumption. This is per year. So you can see ranging from $30 to $280 depending on the technology. Then this is that maintenance slide. So you can see FujiClean requires 2 per year. Singulier also requires 2 per year. Some other technologies are only requiring 1 maintenance visit per year. And you can see anywhere from $250 to $350 in Maryland. And then finally, because they're concentrating their efforts on nitrogen reduction, they've taken all of these costs, compiled them, and then paired them to the performance of each system. And so for the cost per each pound of nitrogen reduced is broken down by system here. So you can see $100 to about $150. So installation is not super different than a traditional septic. As I said, the real powerhouse of the machine is the blower or aeration. There's a little control panel. Its number one job is just to tell you if there's a problem. There's nothing really fancy about that in most cases. You see you've got the single air line and the single influent line coming to the system here. There's no odor. In most homes, it just vents out through the house. If it can't vent through the house, then because of a basement toilet or something that would prevent that ventilation, You can easily add a vent hole and then kind of stick it up the side of the house to ensure that there's no odor. Then if you need to pump the discharge, you can add like a little discharge pump chamber, or as I said before, it can just go gravity into your leach field. Maintenance for FujiClean specifically, and I can't really speak to other technologies. I'm not super familiar with their maintenance process, but for FujiClean, it takes about 30 to 45 minutes. The key with advanced treatment, though, is that maintenance is vital. The systems don't work if they are not maintained. If the air can't reach the media, then you're basically just turning this into a very expensive or more expensive septic tank. So it's really important that they're properly maintained. It doesn't take a ton of effort. The air does kind of the lion's share of the work again in a FujiClean, and so by careful, coordinated turning of these knobs, you can direct the air to clean all of the media on each side, and then backwash all of the sludge back into the first chamber. You'd scoop the scum off of the top so that it's all back in the first chamber, and then poke the bubbles out of the middle. Nothing has to be taken out or replaced. The only kind of replacement part is a filter in the blower, which is up here by the house. And sometimes the diaphragms go bad, after 5 or 10 years, and you have to replace those as well. But those are pretty low cost replacement parts. We're finding on average that it's about 3 years between pumping for a FujiClean system specifically, which I think is a pretty average for septic tanks. Obviously, if you're putting a lot of solids in your tank, you're going to need to pump more regularly if you have like a garbage disposal or something like that. And then I just wanted to kind of close with a picture of some local regulations that FujiClean is familiar with, just to give you guys somewhere to research next. So as I said before, roughly 40% of all residents in Connecticut are relying on on-site wastewater treatment systems, so they're not part of your sewered communities. All of your neighboring coastal communities, so Long Island, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, all require significant nitrogen reduction in their code. So above and beyond kind of the NSF 245 standard. Long Island and Rhode Island are both requiring less than 19 milligrams per liter in some cases, and parts of Cape Cod are looking at less than 10 milligrams per liter in some areas. So I wanted to concentrate a little bit on Long Island since they're kind of right across the sound from you, and you're caring kind of about the same waterways. So as you know, Long Island's made up of a lot of coastal communities. Their economy relies heavily on these waterways. And it's kind of the reason people want to live there and be there is because of, their kind of beautiful water. But it is the biggest on-site county in the United States, meaning that they have more on-site treatment per capita than anywhere else. And most of these on-site systems predate the requirement for a septic tank, so they're all cesspools. And because of the high water table and sandy soils, these cesspools are just leaching nitrogen into the groundwater. So they ended up with huge algae blooms, lots of nitrogen pollution, and they spent a lot of money trying to figure out where is all this nitrogen coming from. And they found that the biggest contributor was, in fact, the cesspools and the on-site treatment. So I have this. This is from our distributor in Long Island, so the information is definitely geared towards FujiClean. But through their program where they required field testing to verify performance of each system, they've got several systems that are performing at less than 10 milligrams per liter. And then I wanted to close just bringing it back to Connecticut. I know that your DEP cares about nitrogen reduction. I read quite a bit about this total maximum daily load program through the DEP for your sewage treatment plants. And they've seen great success in reducing your nitrogen loading into your waterways through that program. And so I hope that that can be a good kind of roadmap to decreasing nitrogen in your on-site systems. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming in and giving this to us. Does anybody have any questions for Cynthia before we let her go? Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so it looks like you don't have a septic tank before this unit, correct?
Correct. So for a Fuji Clean system specifically, the septic tank kind of decreases the carbon loading, and the carbon is vital to the performance of the system. And so if we don't have the septic tank, we get better treatment quality.
Okay, so would you be able to, you wouldn't be able to put one on though, right? You guys wouldn't sort of endorse that?
In most cases, we would not recommend that, especially for just regular residential treatment.
Yeah, the only reason why I say that is because it seems like that's a pretty small chamber for settling, and especially and you did allude to the fact that there are different user habits, and so you really would have to kind of screen your customers pretty good, I would think. Although I find that people don't always tell you the truth about what they do as far as flushing what down the toilet, which is quite upsetting, but that's the reality. So that was my only interesting point, though, is that you don't have a septic tank before that. So you're relying strictly on that one, looks like probably a 300, 400 gallon compartment. Would that be fair to say for settling? Because
it depends on the size of the tank. The whole
okay, so
tank
they vary.
is about 700 gallons, so 300 is probably reasonable.
So is that okay? So the size of the tank itself there can vary.
Yeah,
okay.
so they're rated for different hydraulic loading. So our 500 gallon per day unit is a 700 gallon tank, more or less.
Okay, so you do have, so that the size of that whole unit is going to be functioning. Let's say in Connecticut, we would do it by bedrooms. I think that's fairly consistent across the country. Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think, Jim, you were next.
Good morning, and thank you, Cynthia. I grew up in Long Island, and we did have a cesspool, and we had a sink in the basement. And when that cesspool backed up, guess who had to mop up the basement until we got hooked up to sewer. So that was I hated doing that job. But pumping out the septic tank. With all that median in there, are you pumping out from all three chambers? And can that wastewater, with all those items in it, can that be discharged to a water treatment plant?
So that is a great question. The pump procedure is obviously slightly more complicated than just throw a hose in a septic tank, for sure. There's a specific process that has to be followed, and you wash the media while it's happening to make sure that you're getting as much of that sludge as possible. But there's nothing in the treated wastewater or the sludge or anything that's anything different than a traditional septic. So, it can be disposed of the same as traditional septic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John?
Hi, thanks. I may have missed this portion of the slide. So when you had the diagram of the overall system, and you had the effluent outflow, like after it settles and the blowers work and stuff like that, how big does that go into sort of a traditional gallery system to infiltrate into the ground, or does that go into a secondary holding tank or something like that?
So the dispersal varies widely across the country. In Maine, we just go direct from the Fuji Clean into a regular old stone and pipe leach field, or like a infiltrator chamber or something like that. Some in Florida, they do a lot of pressurized drip systems. So it would go from the Fuji Clean into a pump chamber that acts as like a secondary holding, and then you time dose into your drip dispersal. In Texas, they do all night spray, so they go into
So it's like a
straight from
broadcast, like a broadcast thing?
yeah, they just spray it in the nighttime.
Okay.
That's
And
horrible.
so, yeah. For those of us who do night deliveries, that's not the greatest thing in the world. All right, I guess and yeah, so I'm guessing I don't want to sort of put you on the spot in terms of, but so if in Connecticut it required sort of a traditional leach field with stone lined galleries or something like that, is there a spatial advantage over a traditional septic system? Like, so why would
Yeah,
you use that, on a lot?
yeah, in Maine, if you're using advanced treatment, you get a leach field credit. So you need less surface area because you're not relying on the soil to do the same amount of treatment. The effluent that's coming in is pretty clean. So, you can use a lot smaller square
Okay,
footage
so
to
it's much,
get,
yeah, much more compact. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
yep.
Are there any areas that do like direct discharge to waterways or anything like that? Or
Japan is all direct discharge from this FujiClean system. They use chlorination. And so they direct discharge. There are definitely some, we're worried about bacteria. Obviously, the FujiClean and all these advanced treatments rely on bacteria to get the nutrient reduction. So you have to figure out a way to get rid of that bacteria post-treatment through UV or chlorination or something like that if you're going to do direct discharge.
okay, Bob, you had a question?
Yeah, a couple, Matt. Thank you. Cynthia, thank you. It's really good information. Can you explain a little bit about the process of approving these AT systems in various municipalities and or states and how that process happens? Because I know right now we don't really have a process other than I think maybe through DEEP on the large systems. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious, like, how do you guys do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the big regulatory body for advanced treatment is NSF. There's NSF 40, which is just BOD and TSS reduction, and then there's NSF 245, which includes enhanced nitrogen reduction. In some states, just achieving NSF 40 or NSF 245 is enough to be an approved system. In New England, it's generally more restrictive than that. For example, in Long Island, we had to install 4 pilot systems and test them regularly to be allowed to install widely and then continue to test, and then we met general approval. So, the process to market varies significantly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but hopefully that answered your question.
Okay. On this leach field design, are we looking to do any treatment in there at all, or is it really just to get the effluent back into the ground?
I mean, the water that's coming out is so clean, it's mostly for dispersal.
Okay. So size-wise, is it a 50% reduction from a typical system? Something on
That is
that
what they do
idea?
in Maine. Yep.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the nitrogen removal? I guess I've heard a lot of stories about the AT systems promise the world and then maybe don't necessarily deliver when they're in operation. So can you talk a little that, and you probably obviously know more about your particular system, but just more, I'm thinking more generally, AT systems and how well they do that job.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with you that what your system is able to do in the NSF lab conditions sometimes doesn't match what happens in the field, which is why what they're doing in Long Island, requiring post-installation field testing of the manufacturers to prove that they still work in the field, is kind of revolutionary. There's nowhere else in the country that's requiring ongoing field testing. And so that's why I shared that one slide from our distributor there, because you have to ensure that your system continues to work in the fields. But of course, that only comes through the policy also requiring maintenance contracts. The systems only work as well as they're maintained, and so.
Okay, I guess just one last comment, if I could, Matt. It sounds great. I mean, the numbers that you're quoting are comparable or maybe even below what I'm paying for a traditional septic system right now. So I'm kind of, I'm sort of going, what's the part that we're missing here? Because we should be putting these things in everywhere, and we should outlaw the standard systems based on what you're telling us. So I'm just sort of kind of trying to figure out why these things aren't more widespread, or why this isn't the standard, I guess.
Well, I do want to add that in most of the country, it is the standard. You know, most of the country, advanced treatment is kind of commonplace. So Connecticut is kind of a little bit of a conundrum in the way of on-site wastewater treatment.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I've got for you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Matt, you?
Yeah, just to sort of add to what Bob was just talking about. I think the price quotes that you were given, though, the 17, 18,000 or whatever, that was just for the unit. That was not for the drain field, correct?
Yeah, so the drain field is, you know, heavily dependent on what the site's going to require. Yeah.
Yeah. So Bob, that price that you saw, that's not indicative of out the door. That's just for the unit itself. So tack on what you're already paying minus a septic tank, let's say, which is generally the cheapest portion of a system. That price is a lot more than just the 18,000.
So in preparation for today, I actually talked to, I'm not going to plug anybody because this isn't the place for it, but I talked to an installer and got some quotes. And everything he came back with was like between 22 and like almost $30,000 for like a 6-bedroom system. So and that's what I'm paying for septics right now. Like I pay $25,000 all day long for a septic. So even though she's saying $17,000 for the system, when you add the leach field, it's a smaller leaching field. And it's pretty easy system to install. So he was giving me quotes from on average $25,000, which is in the exact same place that I am right now. So
yeah, that sounds about right. And as Cynthia pointed out, it varies widely. So just give you a quick example of a leaching system price. If the soil conditions are such that you can put the system in the ground, or that's going to be cheaper than bringing in thousands of yards of sand, which we call select fill, because the soil conditions are not good. So the price is going to be double or triple in some cases. So that's why it can vary. And to Cynthia's point as well, that is, as far as what the reduction is, that's each state is sort of has their own way of assessing what the reduction in the leaching system is based off of these technologies. So that's something that we would have to come up with in the future and agree that. So yes, the 20, let's say you use the average of 25,000, that doesn't look into the fact that perhaps there would be some sort of a reduction, so we wouldn't need as much, so that cost would be less. But ultimately, though, just keep in mind, though, that $18,000 is not with the leaching system. That's my only point.
yeah. One of the things that I was looking at was if you were to do it in like a cluster community where I have each unit has its own system, then you use that pump system into a force main, and then that force main goes to a common leaching field. So like each house wouldn't have their own. So now I have a large open field that is where I have all my galleys. And that way, it's significant cost reduction from doing a large 7,500, 10,000 square foot gallons, sorry, not square feet, gallons system. So this could be a lot more affordable from that standpoint. And the other thing that this allows us to do would be if I have a multifamily or multiple houses in a community, I'm going to have a community septic. I'm now able to build this in segments. Whereas if I have to build a huge system, I have to build it on day one. Here, I get to build it in incremental. So I have to put in my force main, then I get to attach units onto it as we go. And all I have to do is create my galley systems. So when we are talking about affordability of housing, sometimes the total dollar amount is less important than the outflow of cash. Because if I can cash flow this as I sell units, or as I bring buildings on, that allows me to control that spend. Whereas most of the time when I look at a subdivision that I have to put in a community septic, I'm out because I got to put in, multi-million-dollar system before I ever get to sell a house. One question before I go to Jim, sorry, I didn't mean to jump on that long. Do your systems have like electronic telemetry that you can communicate if there's a problem remotely?
So I'll say on-site in as a whole is a little bit behind the times on telemetry. Your car manufacturer can see everything about your car at every minute. Your septic manufacturer does not have the same visibility. However, there are control panels that allow like wireless calling. And there are some control panel technologies that FujiClean is looking at currently that is kind of more of a monitoring program.
That would be important to me is if I was putting it into an HOA, I would want to have at least Wi-Fi telemetry giving me up-to-date stuff so I know that my systems are working properly.
Yeah,
Jim,
Wi-Fi,
you had a question?
and like auto dialers, those are pretty common.
Excellent. Jim?
Cynthia, all of a sudden, the state of Connecticut approves the AT system, and your company comes to Connecticut, and there's let's say 5,000 of these units. How do you staff and how do you provide the maintenance to so many different property owners throughout the lifespan? That's my concern. That is the maintenance side. Now you need maintenance people. Can you or do you train local people to become the maintenance overseers on these units?
Yeah, so FujiClean's model, and I can't speak for other manufacturers, but our model is when we enter a new market, we have a distribution partner there that generally has local contacts. They train local people for installation and maintenance. I'll say in Long Island, where they kind of made this overnight switch from, the biggest guy in onsite was the pumper because he was busy all the time pumping cesspools. To now, the most successful people are the maintenance providers. And they've kind of made their own new entity. It's a new part of their economy that didn't exist before. So, but we definitely train people, we would train people in Connecticut to do that service.
Okay. Any other questions? Cynthia, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And
thank you guys so much.
I will distribute your email if anybody does have any other questions, and we can go from there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
All right, guys. Thank you for entertaining that. I just wanted to bring in some more information on that as we get into the last two sections of our process review. But we are at 10:34, and I think I'd like to adjust our agenda to have John kind of walk through, give us the big picture of our tasking from the three committee chairs and how we're going to need to start to lean forward into creating a product by the end of this thing.
Okay, so this is all tentative right now. I can share my screen of basically an email that our big chairman Jim Paris proposed to Representative Kristen McCarthy-Vahey earlier this week. Again, our deadline for reporting out to the committee is January 30th. So we're working on a couple of months here, basically the full month of December, the full month of January. And so working backwards from that, and I don't know if you can see this all right, or if it's too small, but working backwards from that, the final meeting will be the 30th January to present a final report. Jim had proposed some public input, in terms of a hearing or solicitation of public input on our draft report. This might not actually happen because in going back and forth with some of the folks on the legislative management side, this isn't necessarily intended to be a public hearing type organization. Like we're established as a group of subject matter experts that provide guidance to the committee. And then anything that the committee chooses to do with it, or the legislature chooses to do with our guidance afterwards, would then be subject to public hearing process. So we might shortcut that process, and so some of these timelines might shift a little bit. But before then, we'll look for a full working group draft report, which would be the compilation of the recommendations from the three subcommittees, approximately mid-January. So that there is a little time to digest it and tweak it if necessary. So if we're looking for our basically our draft reports mid-January, backing up from there, the idea would be late December, and we've tentatively targeted the meeting of December 22nd, before Christmas, which is a day before our normally scheduled meeting, which would have been a Christmas Eve, I think, or 2 days before. We will have each of the three subcommittee chairs, including Matt, present basically a short presentation of our findings, of our subcommittee recommendations, which would then be prepared ideally initially at the December 12th meeting in a relatively truncated form. So between now and December 12th, we would ideally be expected to kind of come up with a short bulleted list of key findings and recommendations, again, for the December 12th meeting. And then between December 12th and December 22nd, we will try to flesh those out. Let's say we have 4 bullet points. Each of those bullet points will be, turned into a couple of paragraphs that kind of flesh out the recommendations. So basically by, second week of December, ideally, we will have come up with sort of our key findings and recommendations. So that gives us, basically a little under a month, maybe 3.5 weeks, with Thanksgiving in the middle, to kind of make our initial findings. So that's more or less what the committee chairs have, or the co-chairs of the big committee have identified as a likely targeted timeline, so that we don't miss deadlines. And I'll stop sharing right now, and I know Matt has a question.
Go ahead, Matt.
Okay, so I just want to make maybe a quick either observation / suggestion here. So I think, and this will help ease some of the, I would think, the burden to this committee, is there's really 2 issues here. I think that I would suggest rather that we kind of stick. I know we had the AT folks on today and stuff like that, but that really probably needs a whole nother discussion group separate from this. So my suggestion would be, any of the advisement that this committee gives, it would kind of keep AT off to the side, because that animal right there is going to be that you're going to get lost. That's going to just require so much more bandwidth from this committee to get something through with that. My suggestion would be to stick with just, the task before us, the 10,000, the community systems, and the nitrogen. That's just my 2 cents. Just because I think that there's just so much associated with the AT, and it's just so complex that, and obviously we only have a couple of weeks here, that I personally think that it's probably better to focus on just, again, stuff not related to the AT. I mean, you can mention some of it, but just a suggestion.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Jim Paris earlier, because I had heard that that was kind of the direction that some of the other groups are going, is, hey, let's just put AT off to the side. And I agree with that, because there's a huge body of work that we have to address right now. So let's address that. But I think part of our recommendation needs to be, we need a AT working group, because the idea that there's this technology out there that we could utilize as an alternative, and the more, if we bring, I guarantee you it costs more right now if I bring it to Connecticut than it does if I do it and a lot of people are doing it, because supply and demand always helps. But if we bring it in, like, we don't want to have to go through deep for that. Deep is not set up for it. Deep is a giant boat that can't turn, on a dime. It just takes a long time to get anything done. So, like, I think that part of our recommendation just needs to be, we need a process for AT. We need the research done for AT, and we need it so we can push it down to Department of Health and local health departments in order to approve without having Deep involved. I think Deep's just too big of a beast with too big of reach and too slow of a timeline to make that an effective system. So I agree with you 100%, with the caveat that we put a rider on saying we need to have a real conversation about AT, and it needs to be done all on its own. Bob?
Yeah, Jim had his hand up and put it down, probably because you kind of answered, you said what I was just thinking, which is it's got to be a whole separate process. Just what Matt said is we'll get bogged down in this thing. So I think it should be a separate working group going into next year. Whether we're involved or somebody else is involved, or how the legislators want to do that, it's up to them. But I think it's worthy of further discussion, but not part of this, because we'll never get through it by the January.
Do this by January, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Jim?
I'm just a little concerned that we're not focusing on the funding aspect of this group. We're focusing on the process, and I understand about the process to provide some insight for the rest of you, where Matt and I are coming from, and give you guys a little heads up and an eye opener. As it's an eye opener for me listening to you guys about the process that you have to go through. I'm on the same page with Matt, but I did have an understanding about bringing in the cost factor, so you would have an understanding about the cost factor of what an AT system is, which would be part of the funding side. But I apologize, but I'm just really concerned that we have not focused anything on a funding issue yet, and the clock is ticking, and we need to start focusing and getting something down on paper so we can submit it.
Excellent. I do have a question. Adam and Matt, did you guys ever get approval to release your, kind of the structure, just so we had a better idea of how DPH is structured and how they serve this entity of their mission?
Yeah, I thought I sent an email out with that yesterday ahead of the meeting. Yeah, it looks like Jim Cranberry has our narrative breakdown of the environmental engineering program right there that I sent out yesterday. So check your email.
I apologize. I'm one of the worst people in the world about emails, so I'll have to look for that, and we can discuss it next week.
Yeah, I'd meant to get it a few days before the meeting, so apologies for only sending it yesterday. But yeah.
Yeah, we did receive that, Adam. I
Okay, good.
And
I'm
I
just a
can
linguist,
just,
sorry.
when you guys are ready, I'd be happy to go through that. And just so you know, too, as well, there's something else that's before our leadership, and that is what we talked about our last meeting, of some of the training aspects. And I came up with 4 separate what I would call training / funding modules that I felt would be good for the state with on-site, and I even gave some general numbers on that too, funding numbers. So that's forthcoming as well. I'm hoping to get that within the next few days, hopefully.
Okay, that really goes to, what Jim's looking for, and that's kind of the ask that we have to make from the funding and process group is, what do the locals need, and what does BPH need for funding and training in order to meet the mission that's ahead of them, especially as it's being adjusted with the new law. So, has everybody had a chance to review Jim's outline of the process? Because I think we spent a lot of time kind of getting all the way up to the 75, and now the rest is Deep's problem. Does anybody need to go back to that? Do we need to finish that review of that document, or does everybody feel pretty comfortable with it?
Well, I spent hours in front of a mirror rehearsing this.
Well, let's go then. So the only thing that we have left to do is the 7,500. So if we can, we have 15 minutes left. If we want to get that off our list, and then our agenda for next meeting will be, we'll review Adam's document, and Matt is going to bring his training document with him, or send it to us beforehand, and the funding that's required for that. That would be a great place to start for next week. John, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that makes sense.
And I think that's really going to get us a long way on our path to being able to tell the overall committee, what we think we need. John and I are both attending the legal groups. Is that their subcommittee's name?
Yeah, legal and no, wait, what are we? We're process. Legal
and funding.
Yeah,
or process and funding.
yeah, legal and something. I forget which.
Regulations
and legal. Yeah,
regulation. So we're going to be attending
this whole group has been invited. They invited our whole subgroup. So hopefully everyone got that invitation.
Yeah, that's tomorrow afternoon, 1 o'clock, I believe, or 2 o'clock.
2:30, I think.
Or 2:30. Okay.
Yep.
I'm planning
So
to
I think
attend as well.
listening to them is going to give us a good path to how we need to answer, that, because we're going to see where they're going, and then we're going to be able to say, okay, how do we meet that with funding and training? So, without further ado, I'll share my screen, Jim, and you can take us through the last page of this.
All right, so this is for 7,500 gallons and greater, probably soon to be 10,000 gallons or greater. In the Connecticut Public Health Code, Section 1913B104, that's the direction of what DEEP does to those or involvement in those subsurface sewage disposal systems at 7,500 gallons or greater. Pretty much they are, the engineer will contact them. They schedule to do soil testing, which then they're supposed to invite the local health departments to be out there when they do the soil testing. And in my 37 plus years, I have never been involved in any soil testing in the DEEP project, and I've been involved in many DEEP projects. Then after the soil testing is done and all this other stuff is done, the engineer then submits plans to DEEP for their review. Back in the old days, DEEP was concerned about the mounding occurring underneath the leaching system. They were concerned about making sure that nitrate and phosphates meet a certain level before hitting property lines. Then once the plans are reviewed and approved by DEEP, then that gets pushed out to the local health departments for inspections. Local health departments, they do all the inspections, and then once we do a final inspection, the engineer or land surveyor does an as-built, submits the as-built to DEEP, and then DEEP issues out an approval. So I will not issue out a septic permit, even though it doesn't say a septic permit. I require a septic permit. The Chatham Health District does. So we want a documentation of the septic installer installing it, and we'd be able to charge a fee. We have 2 fees that we charge. If it's a small system, like for a trailer park where they're just replacing a septic tank in a leaching field, then we charge a standard fee of $185, just like we do for a single family house. But if it's a multifamily condominium place that I've been involved in, then we charge $500 fee for inspections because it's a lot bigger system, a lot more time getting involved. So pretty much deep reviews, approves, and local health department, we do all the inspections. Hopefully, in the meantime, DPH is aware of it just so they know what's going on, but I don't know if that occurs.
So on a system like this, is there a different threshold for training and for the installers? Is there a different license?
No.
Or is it same license, same little excavator,
No,
same guys?
Yeah, just hate to simplify it, but there's a benchmark. Hopefully, the land surveyor or engineer stakes out the system with grade stakes for the bottom of the system, but there's usually nothing really different than, I'll just say, a standard system, as long as it's something that's not like an AT system. But galleys are put in the same way, with a foot of stone all around the galleys. Maybe Deep might have some other different criteria, but the installation of the septic system, septic tank, pump chamber are all the same as if it fell underneath the local health department. Still got to do the elevation, still got to have the right pitch. So the installation is pretty much the same.
So if that's the same, why do we have to go to a third government entity to do this? Why wouldn't this go in a Department of Public Health? Why are we bringing Deep into this at all?
Because that's in the public health code. Again, a little history, but maybe Matt can help out. Back when I started in 1988, Deep was required to be involved of discharges or design flows of 5,000 gallons or greater. Then I can't remember, it was early 2000, somewhere around there. Then that got bumped up to 7,500 gallons. So it's a public health code. So then you would have to change the public health code. But as I said before, and I think even Cynthia talked about it, we are a unique scenario in the state of Connecticut. We have 3 layers of government involved in subsurface sewage disposal systems.
Adam?
So, I guess I had a couple questions. I had a couple before Matt said something, and then I think that added on to it. So I'm sure most of these 7,500 and above systems, they're pretty much the same thing. It's the same rigmarole every time, but sometimes I know Deep does, has site specific requirements, like either an AT system or I'm sure Matt can speak more on the technical side. I'm going to stumble over myself on the technical side. But so what do you see from Deep when there's like a site specific changes or specifications that need to be upheld on a site that may be different from another site?
Well, again, the technical standards were 18 inches above seasonal high groundwater modeling, 48 inches above ledge. Again, Deep might have, they could require a different separation distance. I don't know, maybe it could be minimum, but I understand what your question, Adam, is. I don't dive into that section. I get a plan that's been with a letter by Deep saying this is the approved plan, and that's the plan in elevations. And so when I do an inspection,
So it sounds like for the Deep site specific stuff, Deep does that inspections, and you guys are doing just making sure the basics are
site specific. The subsurface sewage disposal system is going to be designed for the site specific scenario.
Okay.
So does Deep have like a magic decoder ring that they know like special things that that nobody else gets to know? Is that, I guess I don't understand.
Well, let me give you guys a little. So as again, we have a prescriptive code. They have a non-prescriptive code, which means it's site specific. So you can have, you know, an engineer look at the specifics of it. So, and again, the advantages and disadvantages when you have a prescriptive code, you can get quicker review times. It's easier. This is what the standard is. You got to meet it, that kind of thing. Whereas deeps, it's a little more complex. That's why the review times take longer. So it's not unique. Many other states do have these two sort of state government entities that they break it down through flow, where one entity does the flow up to this and then after that. And I think the idea behind that is as you get more, you know, higher quantities of sewage, you want to scrutinize this thing a little better because you're generating more sewage. And so the standards oftentimes are a little more stringent because, again, you're generating more sewage and potential for more pollution. So that's pretty standard across the country, that, you know, you have the two entities breaking it up. But deep also, again, they, not being a prescriptive code, you know, they can allow all kinds of different stuff. So you do get that advantage as a developer, that you could probably get a property that wouldn't meet our code, but potentially could meet theirs because you could engineer it into it. But that requires significantly more review. It's going to cost you more money. It requires oftentimes operation and maintenance because you're putting an AT on there and stuff like that. So there is a reason for that. But I think the other thing I just want to make a real quick point is to Jim's, his district, it sounds like it's one of the better ones, as I would call it, has a good relationship with deep. That's not that way with everybody across the state. There are some jurisdictions that don't know anything what's going on as far as deep goes. I know one of my districts does, similar to Jim, Torrington. They have a great relationship with deep. They go out there. Deep says, hey, can you go out and do the inspections? They charge the fees and all that. And as I think Jim pointed out too, is anything that's beyond their capabilities, like an AT, they don't look at it. But that's, hopefully I described it somewhat well, the differences between our two entities, agencies.
Thanks, Matt. First, Matt Pollock and I should probably compare notes before we start speaking, because every time I hear him talk, I'm like, this is what I want to say. And I guess to start with, Jim made a point that, like, the public health code says certain things. I think our charge should be, at least in my mind, is that if the public health code needs to be modified, this group, not maybe it's the collective, larger group, should be, I think we are charged with saying that, hey, something's not working right now. Let's make a change to make it better, make it easier, make it work better. One of the things I'm thinking about, and Matt sort of hit on this, is do we change the gallons per day for typical systems and what that design and review process is? And I'm just going to, I'll throw out numbers. It doesn't have to be these numbers, but what if we said anything up to 5,000 gallons is done completely at the local level? And in particular, if we're going to be doing some better education for all the parties involved, the designers, the installers, the sanitarians, the whole, everybody, is that the sanitarians are then charged with everything up to 5,000. DPH takes that off their plate. Matt, you guys don't have to deal with that with your small amount of people. You can focus on the systems from 5 to 10,000 gallons. That's all you have to worry about anymore. And then obviously we kick the big ones up over 10,000 up to deep, and then they have their process. But those are far and few between.
We have that though. Right now, it's the threshold is 2,000. So anything less than 2,000, I never see it.
I'm actually thinking maybe bump it up a little bit. If
we
the sanitarians are qualified, I mean, Jim's saying they're basically the same systems, they're just larger.
Sure.
The process is the same. I'm thinking that the sanitarians are qualified, or we make sure they're qualified so that they can review and inspect those.
Yeah, you can play with those numbers.
It's just a thought as we kind of we're starting to kind of boil this down to what are our recommendations going to be. I'm thinking that might be one that we should have some discussion on. It's just where those steps happen.
And that gets paired with the advanced training. Like, you know, if you add advanced training and better training, then the responsibility of the local health departments, you know, could go up. But on the other hand, Jim's sitting there scratching his head. He's like, I'm already busy enough. I need more people to help me. So, you know, not to use a cliche, but shit goes downhill.
Yeah.
And now we just put more on his plate. So we have
Well,
to figure out
Jim
how
is
to
already
then get
doing
him.
that work. The sanitarian and Jim and the other local sanitarians are already doing that work. They just have the backup of having DPH, a second set of eyes, really, is what I'm understanding it.
That's
And so
true.
I'm saying you're not going to have the second set of eyes for those middle-sized systems, maybe, and we can adjust what that number is.
Yeah. Jim?
And, in theory, Bob, yes, you are correct. It doesn't matter. Local health department is going to be involved in any system from 1 gallon up to 7,500 gallons right now. We still got to review it. We have to review it. We can't send a piece of crap up to Matt's office. We got to review it, and once we think that it meets all the criteria, or up to 2,000 gallons, even 7,500, we got to review it and then send it up to them. So we are in the process. And you're right. And who does the inspections? The local health department does the inspections. So it does. The only thing that it changes, if you want to reduce or increase the threshold of review, is it all falls down, and it still doesn't change anything other than that it will increase the process of the time. So now you have one organization review it versus now 2 different organizations. So it could cut down the time for the review for the contractors and homeowners and property owners.
Excellent. All right. Well,
Maybe-
it's 11. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say this may be something, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, I think that 2,000 number may be in the reg, so maybe that's something we want
It
to
is.
broach with the other subcommittee when we meet up with them tomorrow.
Sure.
Yeah. Why 2,000? That's the question. Why is it 2,000? Or is that just an arbitrary threshold based on most homes would get you up to 2,000 with however many bedrooms or whatever? So, but we are at 11:02. Good meeting. Thank you guys, and probably see you guys tomorrow afternoon on the screen again. Anybody
Thanks,
have anything
Matt.
else in parting? Great.
No, sounds great. Thanks, Matt.
Have a
Appreciate
great
your
week.
time.
We'll see you next week, and I already have the agenda ready to go.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody.